got it.
All right, I think we are starting this meeting. So I'd like to welcome everybody, welcome the Jannah community today, Saturday, for this Jannah guest series, episode 18. Okay, so today we have a wonderful guest, Miss Marjorie Curet. Marjorie will be talking to us about student paths to permanent residency in Canada. So Marjorie is a licensed member of the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants, a member of Canadian Association of Professional Immigration Consultants, and a commissioner for taking affidavits in Ontario. Her company is a proud network of members of CELPIP, Canada's leading general English test for immigration. She is active in various community initiatives that promote diversity in Southwestern Ontario and serves her local community as the fundraising chair of BPW London, which is a non-profit organization that develops business, professional leadership potential for women on various levels with programs and projects around the world. In her earlier professional training and career, Marjorie worked as a scientific researcher with a science background. So we're lucky to have someone who's also familiar with the struggles of students and the nature of academic life. So please join me, everybody, in welcoming Marjorie, and we are very grateful for her volunteering her time and expertise to the Jannah community. So we will proceed with a talk that Marjorie will graciously provide us with for about 45 minutes. And then after that, we have about 15 to 20 minutes for questions. So please feel free to submit your questions in the comment section as we go through this meeting or this talk. Marjorie, welcome. And thank you very much for your time. And the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here today. And yes, we are a company located in London, Ontario. Today, because of the audience, we are looking to focus mostly for students' path to permanent residency. However, because we work a lot with the community, there are also some other subjects I'd like to speak about today. So, topics to expect. I'm going to divide this talk into about 3 portions. One is going to be the options to stay in Canada, some of the more well-known ways, and then some other ideas to help you perhaps plan. Should those more conventional ways don't work out, there are some other options to also stay. So we'll talk about that. That'll be the first part of the talk. The second part, I'm going to talk a little bit about the student refugee, just because it's something that we've noticed in the community in Canada. And there are some things to think about and consider should someone find himself in this situation. So we will be speaking about this briefly as well. The third part is going to be about preventing problems moving forward. So when you think about problems, there are a few different things you can think about. One is, well, problems in the applications that you're sending out. And yes, but the other one, which is major, I think, are problems that may happen in life, which could potentially affect your eligibility. So you're planning towards certain things to becoming a Canadian permanent resident, and then you find yourself in this life situation, which makes you ineligible to apply in the future. And that's always an unfortunate situation. We don't want to see that happen. So we're going to give a few case studies towards the end of the talk that is going to hopefully convey a story. And I feel like stories end up being saved in your long-term memory longer than just facts on a screen. So we'll do some of those stories towards the end. So first, let's go through the more technical parts, which is you're a student in Canada. And this is, I myself, I'm from the United States. So I know very well the American system myself. I don't do American immigration, but what I can tell you is that there are differences between the Canadian and the American process. What I really love about the Canadian immigration process is that you have the options for students. I feel you have a variety of things that you can do. And it's very encouraging. You know, Canada does want to keep people who are looking to contribute. And this pathway is what makes Canada, I would say, internationally recognized. And people do choose Canada because we have these options with students. So once someone is going to be graduating soon, because you should be thinking about what your plans are well before you graduate, is what path am I taking now in order to reach my permanent residency goals, okay? So here I have a map of Canada, but remember, most of what I'm doing is talking about things outside of Quebec. Quebec has a lot of its own rules and laws. So when I'm speaking about a lot of these programs, I'm talking about programs that are outside of Quebec. So we're going to be speaking about federal programs and provincial programs, and then also the postgraduate work permit, which is kind of one of the things that help you score highly in these programs. So the most common pathways. So for number one, what people really like about the being a student in Canada is that you have access to a postgraduate work permit. And this is something that's very different than the United States. So with the postgraduate work permit, once you're able to graduate, you can avail yourself to the opportunity to work in Canada. And we'll speak about that. Number two, the federal economic streams. They commonly, people refer to them as express entry pathways, but express entry is really what is the process, not really the program itself. And we'll get into that next. Then provincial nominee programs, which I think it's a great tool for people to use, especially if they're finding if they're not eligible or they're not scoring high enough in the federal programs. So the postgraduate work permit, what exactly is it? For those who are new to the concept of Canadian immigration, a postgraduate work permit is something that a student, provided they meet the conditions, can avail themselves to. It's an open work permit, which means you're not tied to an employer. You have the ability and freedom to look for work as you see fit for yourself and your family. The nice thing about this is that your spouse is also eligible for an open work permit if your job is at skill level 0A or B. So this may be a new concept for some people, not all. Those in Canada probably have heard of the NOC, but it's a system that allows immigration to determine what skill level your work is at. If your skill level is managerial, professional, or technical, you're probably going to fall into skill level 0A or B, okay? And if it does, that means there's more opportunities for you and for your spouse, okay? What's really nice about the postgraduate work permit and what most students are trying to do with this is they want to apply for the Canadian Experience class. And for the Canadian Experience class, you need at least 1 year of work in Canada to be eligible. And we'll go through that a little bit more in the future, but remember that a lot of people really use this postgraduate work permit in order to apply for this program that's going to lead to permanent residency. Applicants can work full-time off campus while application is being processed. So it doesn't mean that all of a sudden you have to stop and wait for an answer. As long as you meet the conditions to put them in, you can continue to work until you get a decision. So the eligibility, you have 180 days to apply after you graduate. You don't want to let your study permit expire. If for some reason you find yourself in a situation where it is going to expire and you have no choice but to find another option to maintain your residency, you go ahead and do that, because you want to make sure that you're never in a situation where you don't have status in Canada, right? Being in Canada without status is illegal and it compromises you. So always make sure you stay on top of your documents, all right? You must have also continuously studied full-time. There are some exceptions. Sometimes students have the ability to ask for approved leave. And also there is some wiggle room last semester, but in general, they want to see someone who's been committed to their studies. You also have to have been a graduate of a designated learning institute. They're called DLIs, and there is a list of DLIs on the government website. So not all schools in Canada have the option of their students having the opportunity to have a postgraduate work permit. your school has to be one that is allowed to be eligible for their students to have this. So be careful. Basically, what I'm saying is that if you're a student and you're still in the new phase of looking for a place to go to school, make sure that your school is on this list of designated learning institutes, okay? There is a minimum amount of time. These are not programs that are English second language. These are actually programs that are leading to a kind of degree. The minimum is 8 months, and you have to have passed the program. The duration, how long can you get this work permit for? The minimum is about 8 months, but you can do it longer than that. So there are certain guidelines. If it's between 8 months, but less than 2 years, it's the number of the study. If it's for at least 2 years, you get a 3-year postgraduate work permit. And that's fantastic. That's a 3-year open work permit to pursue your dreams in Canada. So again, one of the most, and this, I know, don't be afraid of the slide. We're going to unpack this a bit, but I put it all at once so that people can see that the major federal programs. And one of the reasons why people get the postgraduate work permit and get the work experience is that they want to then use that to apply to the Canadian Experience class. So for those who don't know, and I'm sure a lot do, there are the 3 express entry federal skilled workers, federal skilled trades, and Canadian Experience class. Essentially, these are federal programs that assess people based on a point score. So they assess your human resource factor. So they look into things such as your age, your education, how strong your English language scores are, and to try to assess what you can do for the Canadian economy and the Canadian society. And the more points you get, the more competitive your application is. So people are trying to get the highest points possible, because what happens is that the government will then say, okay, everybody with this score is now eligible to apply. You get an invitation to apply. So people want to make sure their scores are as high as possible. So they're working on their English or getting their education equivalency done to get these high scores. Now, the difference between Canadian Experience class is that these students are, or I should say now they're workers, they are in a smaller pool of people from which there is competition. And also we've noticed that the scores are lower. So you have a better shot of reaching your goal, which is getting that invitation to apply for permanent residency. So the Canadian Experience class, because of this, is what people are looking to get qualified for. And in order to qualify for that, you have to have 1 year of Canadian professional work experience. And then you also have to have, everyone has to have a certain kind of minimum English score. But first, should some, and I'm going to say this a few times in different areas, you're going to catch me saying this. If for some reason you find that you're not eligible to apply for Canadian Experience class, you are going to have to resort to applying for the federal skilled worker. And with that one, you're kind of competing internationally with everyone. That means it's more competitive. And people who are applying overseas for permanent residency, this is what they're doing. They're competing internationally with other professionals to try to get points high enough so that there's an invitation from immigration to say, hey, come apply for permanent residency with us, okay? So federal skilled worker, you need at least 1 year professional work experience in the last 10 years, an intermediate level of English or French. If you have both, even better. If they're very high, more points for you. And there is a threshold. Federal skills trades are probably, I don't see this as often being used by Jordanians, but trades are very much needed in Canada. For this one, the process is different because you're dealing with a trade that usually needs a certification. And then again, Canadian Experience class for those who actually have the work experience here. So again, the nice thing about the Canadian immigration process is that we feel that our process is very transparent. You know what number you're going to be given. You know what number is being selected to pull to see. So you know if you're competitive. There shouldn't really be any question of, well, I don't understand how this happened. I don't know why I didn't get it. We have a transparent system. So you're going to know your points. You're going to know what's being called. And what points are being called varies every month. It depends on what's out there. So people usually put their application in a pool. They wait for 1 year to see if their profile gets called. And if not, they have to resubmit again. The thing about the Canadian Experience class, and I should also mention, is that if you have a job in Canada, you don't have to have the same requirement of having settlement funds. So if you're someone overseas applying for the federal skilled worker program, you have to show that, well, when I come as a permanent resident, I have to bring a certain amount of money with me so that I don't fall into needing social assistance within that the first time of transitioning here. But if you're already working, if you have a job here, then you don't have to show proof of that kind of income. You can show the government, well, I'm working, I'm making an income, and so you don't have to have settlement funds. So that's really nice as well. The other thing I should mention about those who are interested in pursuing the Canadian Experience class, and this is a really important point that I'm going to talk about again, is that you have to have experience as an employee. And there is a difference between being an employee, being a contractor, and being self-employed. So we're going to go through that in the future. So just put that in the back of your head. That's an important distinction. People who they have themselves in these federal programs and they're noticing that their points just aren't high enough. There are other things that you can do. Unfortunately, the older that you get, it can be harder to transition out because your age starts working against you after a certain point. And there are provincial nominee programs that people can avail themselves to. So here I have a slide. It's basically a slide with the different flags of our various provinces. I'm in Ontario. But again, each province is going to have certain programs that are something that is going to benefit them particularly. So they're unique to their own situation, which I think is a great way of also doing immigration work, is that Canada allows these regions to do what's good for them too. So again, why navigate the PNP? Some people don't like using this process, and I understand why. It is a longer process. A lot of times people see it as two-tier, like, oh man, first I got to get through the province, then I have to apply through the federal program. It's double the amount of work. And that's true, but at the same time, if you're not meeting the eligibility for the federal programs, you might as well take advantage of this if you qualify. So some of the pros are that some programs don't require work experience. There could be a different kind of expectation when it comes to language. So if you're having a hard time with your language scores, sometimes these programs may offer something that's a little bit more flexible. And they just have some unique options. I'm going to give you some examples in the next slide about some of the ones that I think are really interesting. So the cons, quotas and intakes. It's true, they're not going to be taking in as many people as the federal program. So the numbers aren't going to be as high for these provincial programs. There are going to be more fees associated because you are working not just with the provincial government, but the federal government too. So, this is also an issue. And because you're dealing with more than one, organization, you're going to be taking time to make sure you get approval from both. Also, the requirements can change quickly. That's the other thing that people sometimes are shocked about. I know that for immigration, you're trying to plan your life, but the provinces can change their laws more quickly than the federal government. So you may notice that there can be changes done automatically for these provincial programs, which can make planning a little difficult. But again, there's so many benefits that come with it. I still think that it's a great thing to consider when you're thinking about how to transition as a student. So let's give some examples of the ones that I have seen. And honestly, I don't feel like these have been utilized very much by people. And I don't know if it's because people just don't know about them or if there's other restrictions, but I don't see people utilizing these, which is why I want to talk about it. So for example, Manitoba has an international student entrepreneur pilot program. And Manitoba is not the only one. There's also another one that does this. And what's interesting about this is that usually students are supposed to be looking for work and become employees. And that is what's giving you eligibility for all these other programs. But here it's saying that, listen, if you want to start your own business, if your intention is to become an entrepreneur in Canada, they want to support that too. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs were kind of young ones, students were falling in the cracks because these kind of programs didn't exist. So this is nice. This is something that is going to encourage people to become, that are innovative and reward creativity and reward those that have that entrepreneurial spirit. And for the Manitoba one specifically, you don't even need a 4-year degree to qualify for this. A 2-year program with any kind of work permit that you have on hand after you graduate is one of the factors of giving you eligibility to this. They expect you to be a fairly young person for this program, so ages 21 to 35, and they want you to have continuously lived in Manitoba. Remember that these provincial programs are there because they want you to stay in the province. They don't want you to then go somewhere else. If a province is good enough to say, listen, we're going to want to keep you and we want you to stay here and to grow with us, then it makes sense that you have that intention to do that. So if you're applying for a Manitoba program like this, they expect you to continuously live in Manitoba and that your intention is to stay in Manitoba and grow your business there. Also, planning to manage your business. So this is not for the person who's looking to just start something and then leave. They want you actively managing and growing your business within Manitoba as well. So again, this offers people who either, they had that entrepreneur vision from the beginning, or people who, even if, for example, sometimes in certain markets, acquiring a job easily is not a possibility. And they know, I'd rather be my own boss. So I think it's great that some provinces are allowing student entrepreneurs a pathway to do this. And we're going to see, I'm sure the government is going to keep tabs and see how this program works out and if these programs should be extended. So another really good program that I should also mention, and I don't see this being used very much either, is in Ontario. So there is something called the in-demand skill stream. Every time I speak to someone about this, they're always in shock that this exists, but why it's is that because it's really market driven. This is to fill in the holes that we have in our economy. So if we know that there are businesses in Ontario and they need workers and they can't find these workers, well, we're going to make it easier for these workers to be able to settle long-term in Canada. And what's nice about this as well is that it's completely different. Again, it's provincial. It's not tied to all the federal expectations. It's market driven. So it's based on need of what Ontario's businesses are looking for. And in order to prevent any kind of, let's just call it funny business, what the government is looking for is, and they're going to be assessing, is the business as well as the applicants. Okay, and this is to maintain the integrity of our system and to make sure that this program is being used in the right way. So both the business has to be assessed as well as the applicant. And what's nice about this is that there are jobs that don't qualify, for example, through the express entry programs like federal skilled worker or even the trades, but we still need these jobs, and these jobs are important to our economy. So this gives opportunity to people who are working as nurses' aides, farm workers, butchers, truck drivers, to then be able to transition themselves, because we need these workers. And Ontario noticed that they were falling in the cracks of our system, that these kind of workers were not given the same opportunities as other kinds of more highly, I would say the ones that are NOC 0A or B. So these are not NOC 0A or B, but they still need the opportunity to transition as well. And you really only need to show 8 months of employment. So for those that are looking to settle down quickly, this is a nice option too. You work 8 or 9 months in one of these capacities. Again, everything I would say in immigration has strict requirements for, and in this case, for both the applicant and the employer. So it's important to really know what they're looking for before you go down this path. But it's a great option for those that are here and are trying to figure out where they fit in the system. So let's move on to that. And now we're going to talk a little bit about refugees and what refugees really are and who should be availing themselves of this program. And I say this because in being in Southwestern Ontario, you hear a lot, you see a lot. There is you do a lot of consultations, and this seems to be a very common question. So I thought, you know what, let's just talk about it. Let's talk about it, and let's see if you have any questions, that's fine too. But what is a refugee, right? We hear about people coming here and applying for refugee status. And so let's talk a little bit about really who is someone who should be, I'm sorry, let me go back, who should be availing themselves to this. So in the 1951 Refugee Convention, really a refugee is someone who is unable or unwilling to return to their country of origin owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion. So let's focus on some of the key words here, okay? Someone has to have a well-founded fear, okay? A fear that's substantiated, not something that you can prove. You're really afraid of being persecuted, meaning that you really believe that your life is on the line here, okay? And that you don't believe that your government can protect you, or that your government is actually the one persecuting you, right? So you have a fear of your life, and that you don't believe the government can protect you, or that government is the one who's implicated in actually causing this potential harm to you. So keep that in mind. Now, when people think about being a refugee, often they're thinking about, well, I know so-and-so and they have this, these benefits that come with applying for this, therefore it's a good thing for me. But what they don't understand is that there's also associated costs with applying for refugee status in Canada. And so I wanted to go into this a little bit more in depth because I don't think that it's something that is talked about enough. So one of the major losses to you, now for people who need the refugee program, it is there to protect those that are in fear of their life, that are being persecuted. Okay, so if that is the situation, then that is the program for that person. But let's also go through the costs associated with it. And I just mentioned a lot of really other good programs that you can utilize. And you have to realize that when you are deciding to go down the route of applying to be a refugee, that you're going to lose a lot of these other options. So a lot of these programs close to you. You can't then turn around and say, well, I'm not sure how things are going to go, so can I apply for something else? The answer is probably not. Once you go down that route, all the other options, the door is pretty much shut. So really think about, if you are someone who requires that kind of protection, what you're really saying is that you don't believe your government can protect you and that you're asking Canada for that protection. How does this affect the community and others? And I think this is something that's also not talked about a lot either. Let's say that immigration does keep tabs on their students and what they're doing and what impact that has on them, their bottom line, essentially. And this also isn't something that's talked about very often, but there is a large community impact on both Jordanians and I would say the refugee community at large. So what happens is that Canada does look to see what target markets or countries, what countries they're looking to acquire students from. And there's some that get higher priority than others, and that's just how it is, and that's how it's been. When Canada starts collecting information, because like everything else, the data is available, they're looking to see if the students and if these programs, I would say if these programs are causing a positive net benefit or harm. So basically, if people are if the country is running in the red or in the black, which countries are really contributing to our economies and which ones are kind of doing the opposite, right? So if immigration realizes or sees that certain students from certain areas are actually causing, let's say is causing a financial issue and that it's not a net gain for Canada, but maybe the opposite, then they're going to remove those countries from the list of countries where they're going to be recruiting students from, okay, or where their target markets are. So I would say that Jordan used to be on the list of this group of countries where they wanted to get students from this country, and they've been removed from that list. And they've been removed for that list for a reason. And I know it's shocking to think that the government is keeping financial tabs on everything, but that's exactly what they do, and we shouldn't blame them for that, right? They're going to decide whether or not it's worth it for them to invest in certain markets or not. So what this does is that if that country is no longer on that list and they're not actively trying to recruit students from there, that means that when other people in your family are applying, your sister, your brother, your cousin, and refusal rates are starting to become very high, there's a reason for that. And I don't know how to make that any more clear. So whatever people do here, it does impact people back home. So how does this impact the refugee community at large? So now I'm talking about outside of Jordan, but just people in general who need protection. If you're someone who does not need this protection, then you're essentially causing a glut in the system. That means there's applications being submitted that don't need to be submitted, and that people who really do have their life on the line and really do have this fear of losing their families, now they're having to wait because there are other applications out there that are really not necessary. So you're impacting the refugee community as a whole should there be unnecessary applications in the system. And the other costs that I would say that comes to people, so we'll get away from the more community impact. Maybe community is not something that impacts everyone directly, but let's talk about your people themselves then. Let's talk about the impact on travel. So most people know that when you're applying for refugee status that they ask for your passport. So most people think, okay, fine, I'll surrender my passport, but they don't think of the long-term implications of that. First of all, I think it'd be interesting to talk about if anyone really knows about who those passports actually belong to. Many people think, well, it has my picture in it. It has my ID, that passport's mine. The passport's not really yours. The passport belongs to the country that has issued it. And that passport actually belongs to them. And what does the passport mean? A passport means that when you're traveling around, you are able to travel under the protection of the government who issued you that passport. It means that should something happen and that country has to come to your aid, say there's a natural disaster, you're traveling with the protection of that passport and what that country is willing to do for you. So the passport has a much stronger weight than what people really think about it as. It's not just a travel document. It means a lot more than that. So I'm going to give just one case study that actually took place. So the reason why I'm going to pick this next example is because it's something that you can actually Google and find still. It's an older example, but you'll still be able to find it if you look for it. And that's why I'm going to use it. And this is going to be really looking at travel and how this pathway, how it's going to impact you potentially long-term. So this is an example of an Afghan native, okay? This came out all over the papers in 2016, but it actually started much earlier than that. What happened in this case was this gentleman actually came in as I believe he was a group-sponsored refugee. And when he landed, he was confirmed to be he was permanent resident. So now we're talking about a situation he's not someone who's stuck between, am I a refugee? Am I not a refugee? Has it been determined? No, he's actually someone who now has permanent residency. What happens and what happens to a lot of people is they miss people from back home, right? They have parents, the parents are aging, they want to see them. Maybe they have issues with their marriage, or maybe they're looking to get married and they want to go back. But again, remember that what you're saying when you're a refugee is that you believe your life is in danger in that country. And if your life is in danger in that country, it doesn't make sense that you would be returning to that country. If you have a genuine fear of prosecution in your homeland, it doesn't make sense to return to your homeland. So let's look at this gentleman's situation, okay? He decides he wants to go back because his parents are sick. And he actually went back on 3 different occasions. Also, he mentioned that he was having problems with his wife, and he was looking for ways to kind of make sure they stay together. So he took 3 trips back, I believe, I think it was around 2013. Eventually, it was realized that this is what was going on, and a cessation application was initiated, okay? What this means is that it was determined that he really did not need the protection that he said he needed, and that he no longer needed the benefits associated with what that refugee application gave him. So how does this happen? Well, when a person, the protection can be ceased when a person has voluntarily acquired a new nationality and enjoys the protection of that country with that new nationality. If a person becomes reestablished in the place where they were seeking safety from, or if the reason for which the person sought refuge doesn't exist anymore. So maybe there was a huge problem, but it has since resolved, or Canada says you don't really need the protection anymore. So when a person is enjoying the protection of a country, when you're traveling with the passport from the country you're saying you need protection from, you're doing the opposite. You're actually enjoying the protection by using the passport of that country. So this gentleman was eventually found to no longer have needed, he was found to have reavailed himself of Afghanistan's protection, and that his life would no longer be in danger there. So they determined he did not need the permanent residency. Was actually stripped from him eventually. So again, that is something many people don't think about long term. And they say, well, I know many people who have traveled back and nothing has happened to them. Well, what you can say is, well, nothing has happened yet. And is everyone caught doing this? No. But understand what it is that you're doing, and understand is that the kind of situation you want to put yourself in. If you have a situation where you really should not be applying for this, don't do it, because there are long-term implications and there are many other options available to you. I hope that knowing about the other options and knowing about the potential costs of taking this pathway can help you make a better decision. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the third part of this talk, which is looking at preventing errors and things that may cause you to become inadmissible. If there are any questions, again, we'll take them at the end of the presentation. So preventing errors. People plan sometimes their whole life coming to Canada. They want to get the permanent residency. How can I prevent myself from getting into trouble? Some people think, oh, well, becoming as a student was the hardest thing, right? What can possibly go wrong now? Well, again, there are application issues. There are eligibility issues. I think application issues are probably some of the, I would say, not as complicated things or not as traumatic. They can be. But what I'm going to focus on mostly is the eligibility issues, because sometimes that becomes a shock to people and it's really unfortunate. So we'll start off briefly just going over application problems. And I would say that the largest application problems are just really simple things like people missing their deadlines. So you have to stay on top of everything that you're doing. Plan appropriately. If your documents or translations are not ready and you're trying to submit things while you still have status, you can be significantly delayed if you're not planning appropriately. You can have things returned back to you if it's incomplete, if you just have not, it's just poor planning, right? So part of the process is just making sure that you're doing what you're supposed to do. The other one, which is more serious, is misrepresentation. This is when people are applying, but they are actually putting in information that's going to cause a different interpretation of the regulation. So maybe they're trying to get permanent residency when they know they shouldn't because there's an issue. Sometimes it's an error. And if the officers are not always going to know what if the error was done intentionally or not. So you don't want to get yourself in trouble by providing information that could be interpreted as being false. Remember that credibility is huge. And you want to make sure that you always maintain that sense of credibility between you and the officer. So there's a huge consequence for providing false information. So make sure that you go over everything in full, that everything's accurate, that you are consistent between your documents and everything that you're telling the government. Right? That's the best advice I can give you for that. Consequences could be inadmissibility for 5 years. And you're not able to apply as quickly as you would like again. So that is a huge problem. But now we're going to go into some case studies and how this impacts eligibility. So this one I entitled A Time for Everything. Okay, it's actually based off of a real event that happened. Again, if you Google it, you'll be able to find who this happened to. But here we're just going to make up a fictitious name. So here we're going to call this person Munir. Okay, so Munir is really excited to apply for his postgraduate work permit, and he plans on buying a new car soon. He works part-time in the trucking industry, and he really is hoping to save up some money to buy a new car. So he's been putting in some extra shifts, right? So I understand the situation he's in. He needs to make a little bit of extra money. So he's working a little bit more than he should. What happens is that maybe he's speeding, or maybe the streets are closed for whatever reason. An officer approaches him and asks to look at his documents. They realize he's a student, and they pull the travel log for the truck, because trucks keep a lot of these travel logs, and it's determined that he is working over the 20 hours a week that he's allowed to by immigration. So what happens, right? He gets arrested. He gets pulled in for not being compliant with the conditions of his study permit, and now his entire future is in jeopardy. So this is something that actually does happen because students become too eager to start working, or they like the amount that they're gaining here, and so they're pushing themselves to do something that is actually illegal. So you want to make sure that you don't violate the conditions of your study permit. Doing so puts you in breach of that and has catastrophic consequences. You can lose your student status for doing this. You may not be approved for a study or work permit in the future. So if you are in Canada, everything is going great, your studies are going great, but you don't meet the condition, you're not meeting the conditions of your permit, you put everything in jeopardy. And what happened to this gentleman, and what happens to students who get caught in the situation, is that they can be issued a removal order for non-compliance. So then you have a ban from being able to return and finishing your plans. You don't want to find yourself in this situation. And I know sometimes I actually hear people say, well, maybe they're not in trucking, maybe they're in some other line of work, and they say, well, how are they going to know? What are they going to do? That's a pretty cocky attitude. I would say that they use a lot of things these days. You're essentially walking around with a mobile tracking device, your cell phones, right? There are a lot of things that are easily searchable should you find yourself in that situation, where they can see where are you going over a certain period of time? How often are you going there? I mean, this shouldn't be a let's see if they catch me approach. There are ways that these students get found out, and it's better just to comply with the conditions of your study permit. So again, the whole point of what you should be doing here as a student is actively working towards the completion of your studies. If you're not actively working towards the completion of your studies, you can get that permit and the right of studying taken away from you. What does it mean to actively work? It means that you are taking steps to pursue what it is that you told immigration you were doing, which is chasing that degree or that program. If they find that you are jumping programs too many times, or there's too much time that has passed between one program to the next, they may say, you know what, you are not actively pursuing, and ask you to leave. So take that into consideration You need to be actively working towards your goals, and you need to be making sure that you're in compliance with the conditions of your study permit. Study. We'll talk about this one. Case study, his name's Isa, okay? These are fictitious names, but in order just to give it a personal touch, this gentleman is really excited because he got a degree in marketing in Canada, okay? And he needed a job afterwards. He got the postgraduate work permit. He really needs to work, and he's looking for something that's in his field. So he sees a position as a graphic designer in or a small dealership, a car dealership, okay? And he thinks this is a great opportunity. I'm going to get some experience marketing. I'm going to do this graphic design work that I'm good at. And then I'm going to apply for the Canadian Experience class. So he starts working, almost a year goes by, he's preparing his papers, he's about to apply. Then he finds out that I get the documents and I say, wait a minute, it seems to me that what's happened here is that you're not really employed by this company, but you're in fact someone who they are considering you as a contractor. Your work is being contracted out. And because of that, because you're considered not an employee of theirs, you're not eligible for the Canadian Experience class. Well, Isa is totally confused. What do you mean? I've been working there. They've been giving me salary slips. I am an employee. But when you look at it, you notice that the employer is not deducting all the things that you would expect him to deduct should he be an employee. So he's not taking out the right kind of taxes. He's not putting money towards the long-term retirement and pension plans. He's not taking EI out of there. And that saves the company money, but it changes his employment status. So now he is not eligible to apply for the pool that he thought he was. So remember, for the Canadian Experience class, the requirement is that you must have 1 year of paid employment after your studies. You should be working as an employee for a company. And you need to make sure that you really are an employee before 1 year of your life slips away and you realize that maybe you weren't. So self-employed work doesn't count for this program. Check your salary slips. Make sure that the right deductions have been taken out and that you really are an employee. If you have questions about this, contact your accountant and have someone look at it for you to verify and give you that peace of mind that I have what I need in order to apply for the program that I'm going to be chasing in the future. Don't wait until a year is over to verify that. So understanding if you're an employee or not is crucial. Sometimes these concepts are foreign to people because they're coming from areas where they don't necessarily do these things. But I'm just telling you this to make you aware moving forward that you have to be careful in terms of what your status as an employee is to qualify for some of these programs. Next case study. We're going to call her Mona, okay? So again, for some of these programs, one of the main issues that we find is that they want to apply for a certain program and they get really excited about the job they're selecting, but does this job make them eligible for applying for the right immigration program? So in this story, what happens is that Mona graduates from a business degree. She's looking really hard to find a job. It's not always easy. So when she lands something at a local bank, she's very excited. It's a big name bank. And she thinks this is great. This is going to give me a foot into the door of being able to work through and to maybe get into a higher level at this company. So I'm just going to start working as a bank teller here. It's a respectable job. And then I'm going to apply, in a year from now for Canadian Express entry, and things are going to go great. So she's been working at this job for a year. This person comes and says, hey, I'm ready now to apply for Canadian Experience class. Let's do it. I pull up the NOC looking at the kind of job that she has, and I find that it's actually NOC 6551, customer service representatives. Customer service representatives are actually not considered eligible for the federal skilled worker or the Canadian Experience class because that's a NOC level C. Right now, you need 0, A, or B to utilize that job for both of those programs. Now, if she has worked a different kind of job in the past, maybe she can use that. But if she hasn't, if she's young and if she's just as her first time working, that job working in that capacity is not going to help her with her immigration. And that's a really sad situation to be in, because here she is planning for her life, thinking she's made the right choice and thinking she has the right job, and it's not going to help her. So Mona's not happy about this, right? You have to remember your knock level plays a role in your eligibility for immigration. You have to make sure that the job that you are signing on to work for is going to be something that helps you later on down the road. Ensuring that your employment qualifies is something that you can do, or if you're working with someone, they can help you with. It's a really important part of the immigration process. You want to make sure that you have it right. So moral of this story is you need to choose your job carefully. Don't take anything just because you are new and you need to make sure that you're working right away. Move forward cautiously, making sure that you have the job that is going to be at the right knock level. Next study. This is an even sadder situation where we will call this is an inadmissibility issue. So basically, this person is a student. Perhaps they've moved on and now they're working at a job, but they're still, or maybe the income's not enough and they want to take on some extra shifts and they think, okay, what can I possibly do in order to earn a little bit of side income? And as everyone knows, Ubering and using any kind of ride share, side job possibilities are pretty popular. So this particular person decides, okay, I'm just going to take some few shifts doing this ride sharing and make a little income this way. And to be honest, it's not a bad idea. I mean, he makes a little bit of extra money. He has that flexibility. He gets to practice his English and meet interesting people. But unfortunately, one day somebody, gets into his car who is, maybe she is ill, or maybe she is she's been out, in the night doing, getting intoxicated. So she's not 100% in the right mind. Maybe she passes out or falls asleep in the back of the car. He turns around, he reaches his destination. He needs her to leave. He tells her to get out of the car. The ride is done and she's not responding. She's not listening. He turns around and physically puts his hands on her and wakes up. She is confused. She screams for help. The police are called. Before you know it, there's potential charge at this point of assault or worse against Rami. So what ends up happening in this situation is now the guy's entire future is in jeopardy, right? Any kind of potential assault charge or any kind of criminal related associated activity is something that's going to lead to an inadmissibility issue. So not only does that impact his life here in Canada, whether or not he wants to, transition, he's working, he was a student and now he wants to be a PR. How is he going to explain this? In some cases, being charged you don't even have to be convicted. Being charged is enough to really cause problems. Not only that, but in the future, should he ever look for wanting to sponsor someone from back home, having a charge like this can also create problems in future sponsorships. So that's something to take into consideration. So you don't want to end up in an inadmissibility issue like this by accident. So what are some examples of criminally inadmissible offenses? Things like assault, money laundering, possession of narcotics, reckless driving, which I would say is different than careless driving. Reckless driving is when you are actually putting someone's life at risk by the manner in which you're operating the vehicle, by how you're driving. And of course, any kind of DUI will also render you criminally inadmissible. So you want to make sure that while you're in Canada, the lesson here is you don't put yourself in these dangerous positions and you take care in this process. Sometimes things just happen. You want to try to prevent any of these things from, innocent people get caught in the crosshairs of these things. So why did some of these things even happen in the first place? Well, I would say that for some, it's because they're looking for additional income. Canada, the prices are different here than they are overseas. And what can you do if you find yourself in a position where you need to make money? Canada, when the government decided you were coming in as a student, they did ask, I'm sure that people who applied will remember, they ask you, how much money are you coming in with? You have to show proof that you have this income, or that the person who is providing for you has it. So the government feels like they have already done what they're supposed to do to make sure that you have the funds you need to study in Canada. So what happens though if those funds run out or those funds aren't enough, right? Rather than being caught in a situation where you're working more than you're supposed to, or you're working in a job that perhaps you really shouldn't, you have to think about other possibilities. So if in the event you find yourself destitute, so for that destitute means someone who cannot pay for the necessities of his or her life. So we're talking about shelter, food, those kind of things, not, oh, I need a little bit of extra money so I can have a good time. We're talking about someone who cannot pay for the necessities of their life. If an international student finds themselves in this position where they can't cover their tuition fees and they can't cover their expenses, and it's due to an unforeseen event, there is a way that you can apply for an open work permit so that you can work more hours and so that you don't fall into major hardship. You know, Canada doesn't want students ending up in these dangerous positions. So this exists should that happen. But again, remember that part of this is the government feels like it's already assessed you. When you applied for a study permit, you said that you had a certain amount. So there has to be some significant unforeseen event for you to have ended up in this situation, for them to approve this open work permit. So let's give some examples of what that might be. For example, if there is the crashing of a banking system, right, which has happened in countries like Lebanon, if there is a pandemic that brings the economy to a halt, if the person who is financially supporting you all of a sudden dies or becomes ill and is no longer able to do that, and you fall into hard times, then this option becomes available to you. Again, it's not meant for people who are just looking to take on extra shifts because they want more. You have to have a valid reason, and you have to be a person who is considered destitute. So now we will just talk briefly about what to expect in the future in terms of some of these immigration pathways. I think what's interesting is there is going to be some changes to the NOC by November 2022. So right now, the way that it's separated is going to be spread out into even more, let's say, I think right now it's at 4, they're going to separate it into 6 different categories. So hopefully it'll be able to give more information to the officer about the kind of job that you have. That change will take place later in the fall. And there's also a lot of talk about changes to the express entry system, which is also going to be interesting. Canada does have a need for certain kinds of workers, and there is talk about making that a selection criteria in the express entry. It hasn't been confirmed. It's based off of memos that people have gotten from immigration. So it's not 100%, but there's already talk in the press about this. So they maybe will see that in the future for express entry, they'll be calling people based on their previous occupations. That'll be a really interesting twist. So we'll see how that unrolls and develops. So those are just some things to look forward to in this year in terms of changes. We've covered a lot of content. I understand that some of these topics could probably have their own talk by themselves. So that was a lot of information to cover, and I'm happy to take any kind of questions if there are any at this point. So thank you for having me here. Thank you very much for inviting me. And if anyone has anything, please let me know.
Marjorie, thank you very much. This was very, very interesting and actually very detailed. I have learned quite a lot of this wonderful presentation. So really, thank you. So look, I have actually got one question for you, and I got a couple of questions that seem to be related in the comment section and the floor, and maybe like I have another 2. So we have like 2-3 questions to go about. So one of them, if I may start, is you mentioned like when you were talking about, I think one of the slides where you showed the Jordanian passport, I guess, you were talking about the idea that certain countries move from one category to another category depending on what the Canadian government decides based on their data that they need, students from this population or that population. If I got that right. So what I understood is that at one time, Jordan, for example, was a member of a group of nations where the Canadian government sought or looked for like academic expertise, and then it moved out. Does that make sense? Is this what you said?
Right.
And
so
yeah, just a little bit collaboration in this one. Like, what does
right. So there are markets, and when we say markets, we mean nations, they're countries.
Yeah.
There are markets that get put on lists for priority, priority nations. And that list is determined based on a number of things, information that I don't even have access to, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I know that Jordan was on that list at some point, and Jordan was taken off of that list. I don't have the exact date. It was a few years ago when I saw this happen. And I know there's probably been a difference in terms of the number. I don't have the stats of statistics in regards to the number of students who were allowed entry based on year. But from what I recall, that it has dropped. And what Canada does is that it looks at what has happened once students come in, and they look, there is a number that's generated. And I don't have the formula for that. I don't know how that number is being calculated, but financially, they look at the net income or the net benefit or the net negative, how much money Canada's lost as a country based off of the nationality of those students. So, for example, there are certain nations where the loss is significant, and Canada has that information, and they know that people coming from that nation, they are coming from a nation that has that loss. That's not something that's generally talked about. I don't really even read a lot about it, but it's something that exists, and I think people should be aware that when you are leaving your country and coming to another country, you're kind of like a mini ambassador, right? You're representing that country too, and your decisions and what you're doing, whether you're contributing to the economy or whether you're taking in terms of any kind of additional supports. For example, that happens, I would say when certain groups say that they need protection, and what happens is that they're given an income or they're giving benefits in order to help them here. All of that is not something that isn't calculated. All of that is calculated. So Canada knows exactly if there is a benefit or not a benefit. And like I said, I'm sure that formula is more detailed than just that. But I mean, I don't have the latest one, but there are people who do have it. And unfortunately, Jordan was a country that was taken off the list for that reasons. So what I'm trying to say there is that I know that a lot of times people are looking for what is best for them, but in making that decision, realize that you are impacting others who are still there as well. If people in your family are applying as well and they're not getting acceptances, it's something that everyone is a part of, right? Everyone is collectively, as a nation, you're representing your country outside. And if it falls off that list, or if Canada is seeing that it's very expensive for them, if there's not a benefit, it's going to impact everyone else in your country, in your family, in your neighborhood. And that's not something I think a lot of young people really think about. And I think they should. And I know that Jordan has this great concept of thinking about family and thinking about their family structure. So I always think that I'm sure that if Jordanians know about this, hopefully it'll mean something to them too, and just realize that Canada does keep tabs on every nation and the differences between what students from certain regions are doing and how they're impacting us.
So yeah, you pretty much summarized what I wanted to say, or pretty much what I understood is that the decision of one person affects actually the nation they come from. So if a student comes to Canada to study and they follow suit on their plans, that gives more credibility to future applicants from the same country. So that's the idea. I think this also applies to the United States. The more people you get from one country that pretty much adhere and stick to their plans, the easier it becomes for the next generation to follow suit. The more violations they make, the harder they make it for other people.
Exactly.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you very much. Now, the other question is this, and I think it follows pretty much on like similar lines. So if a student like arrives in Canada, I assume on like some kind of student visa, but when they arrive there, they're supposed to join their college. That's the reason why they came to Canada. They end up not going to college. Maybe they have like a set of skills that they want to use in the market, or they have like some experience, whatever. So what happens in this case if somebody like gets in Canada with a student visa, but decides not to automatically go to college, or like postpone studies, try to find a job, things like these? What are
Right, okay.
the implications?
Okay, so I think it's important to recognize the difference between a visa and a permit, right? A visa allows you entry into a country. A permit determines what you can do in that country. If a person gets a permit and the associated visa for studying, there are conditions associated with that permit, right? If you're found to not be doing the activities that are in that permit, then there's no reason to have it, right? They'll take it from you. So if you're planning to come to Canada to work, you apply for a work permit. If you're coming to Canada to study, you apply for a study permit. And anything outside of that is going to cause problems. I would say that the labor market being the way that it is right now, we are in a time where we do need a lot of workers. So sometimes what ends up happening is a student may come and there's a great opportunity to work at a company, and the company decides to hire them. And that's a different situation, right? And then now they're applying to have a work permit, and their status is changing. So now they're allowed to work. Once they're allowed to work, you're fine, you're on your way. But working while over the hours specified or not complying with the study permit puts you in a lot of danger, and it's illegal. I mean, pure and simple, it's illegal. Again, like I said, one of the reasons why I mentioned these other options is because there are programs for people who want to do different things. Like immigration is complex. It's not student or nothing. There are other things that you can do, but you have to remember at all times, you want to maintain your status. That is a part of that's a part of Canadian law. Maintain your status, whether you're working or not. Say, for example, you are studying and your study permit's expiring, or you're not complying, you don't know what to do, and you want to make sure you're not here illegally. Then if you're just a visitor, then you can always change that to a visitor. But you have to make sure that you have the right paperwork for whatever activity you're going to be doing in Canada. And that was the other reason I also gave some case studies, was to give you examples and some stories of people who were in breach of their study permits, their conditions, and what happened to them, right? So some of those you can still Google and find in articles. So it's important to make sure you meet the conditions of whatever you promised Canada that you're doing. All that paperwork that went in was telling Canada, this is my intention, this is what I'm doing, this is the funds I have to support myself. And then to not follow through on that, you're putting yourself in a dangerous position. And you're doing Canada the disservice too, because you need to make sure that if you're changing what it is that you're doing, you have the paperwork to go along with that.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, again, I mean, that's pretty much another general similarity between the two systems, the Canadian immigration system and, as far as I know, the American immigration system. You set yourself that you're coming here to be a student. That's what you do. You're a student until the conditions allow for some change of status through the legal channels, and that is fine. But getting out of status or becoming illegal complicates, future applications for immigration at any level. That's what I know. Anyway, that's very interesting. Again, thank you very much. Now, another question is this. So for people interested in immigration to Canada through work, Do you have an idea, maybe through the cases that you deal with in your office or generally, like how the market is going in Canada, like on what kind of professions that are highest in demand nowadays? I know, for example, for American market, for the market in America, pretty much professions in the healthcare system are in high demand. Nurses, doctors, etc. Those people find it easy to get permanent residency, eventually become citizens. But there are licensing programs that they have to go through and language requirements and training and all these things. So if you can briefly, maybe let's go over those. I mean, if you're familiar with that.
Sure. So again, what's interesting about the Canadian system is that we do have not just the federal, but the provincial paths that people can take, and the provinces can dictate what they need. So that list is going to change based on what province you're talking about, right? Some provinces are going to really need some kind of skills more than others. So depending on what city or what area you're looking for, that list will be different. Now, I think what it might be helpful moving forward is that the speculation that express entry is going to be changing to actually do just that, where they may be calling people for permanent residency based on their skill set. So right now, you're right, people are applying for working in, for jobs. They have to have someone saying, hey, I really need you. I have a labor market impact assessment, or depending on what the kind of job is, a work permit. And then you have to go through those steps to get that. But maybe in the future, what we're seeing is that express entry might be calling people with that skill set without them even having to come. So the federal skilled worker program usually was just for NOC 0A and B. So those are high skilled managerial or technical positions, but now we might be including other positions as well. And it may be calling those that are in need. So they may very well solve the government may solve this problem themselves, what you're just mentioning, by picking those people who have the skills they want and just calling for them when they're applying for permanent residency. So I think that'll be a great change. It'll really solve a lot of our problems here. But the other thing I mentioned too, so you're right, like there are certain areas that will need certain skilled professions, and each one's differently. So I can't really speak to each province. But what I can say is, aside from the really high skilled jobs, I mentioned the Ontario In Demand program for a reason. And that's because there are also other kinds of jobs that need to be filled in Canada too. And some people don't even realize that those jobs are so in demand that they've created their own pathway for them. Most Jordanians aren't thinking about being a butcher or working as an aide, but we need like personal support workers, we need nurses, aides, and things of that nature. And those kind of jobs have a pathway for permanent residency if they can acquire that here. Some companies here are so large and they have a labor market impact assessment on file, so they're able to hire a lot more freely. I can't tell you exactly what companies those are, but like there are companies out there that have this, and they need workers so badly, and immigration knows it, that they're able to hire a lot easier than other companies. And if you meet the conditions of that in-demand program, that's another really great way, I think, for people to begin their life here as well. I mean, I think the requirements for that is you work 8 or 9 months in one of those fields, and then you can apply through that provincial pathway. And honestly, I don't really see a lot of people using it. The limitations is that there are quotas, right? It's not going to be something for thousands and thousands of people, but it does exist for a reason. So skill levels, they need people in all skill levels. And so it's a hard question to answer with specific jobs, but you will find that these provinces list the areas and skills that they need on their own websites.
Yeah, I understand it's hard to like give specific certain professions because this keeps changing. Marjorie, we are actually almost 15 minutes beyond our schedule, but that is completely fine. I have definitely enjoyed that, and I think the information you so graciously provided is very, very beneficial for so many people. So we are very, very grateful. Please allow me to thank you again and again on behalf of Jenna Council and Jenna community for this wonderful time, for your expertise, for volunteering your time to us. And our last slide here, which you again provided, has your contact information, phone number, the email for your firm, company. And I'm sure, you know, people probably contact you with more specific questions. And then this talk again, yeah, go ahead.
Now, I was going to say thank you so much for having me. I hope that some of the topics are sensitive topics, but I think that they're still good to talk about. I don't see enough people talking about them. So I hope that I was able to shed some clarity on some of these different topics that students normally, they end up speaking to each other about. So I'm happy to do this, happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Look, when I first started thinking about you staying in America as like a resident and pretty much getting naturalized, I wish I had maybe 10% of the information that you provided. There was pretty much nothing. If you faced any problem, you'll definitely have to go on your own and find somebody for help. I think we have a live document now that's available for people for years to come. And thanks to you and your firm, your people, I mean, we really appreciate that. Marjorie, thank you so much for your time. And again, there's your contact information available for everybody. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. Enjoy the good weather in Ontario. Thank you.
Will do. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.
And for all Jenna community, thank you guys for being here. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.
All righty.
Thank you.
No problem.